necessary.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. In fact, probably the most offensive review I ever received was, I think it was in the Washington Post. And the reviewer said, "Oh, Aslan's Jesus is just a failed Muhammad,"
There you go.
which is it's just a stupid thing to say because they don't have anything in common with each other. It's just ridiculous. But I do think that you bring up a really good point. I think for a lot of people, it does overturn this kind of central and frankly unhistorical conception of Jesus as this inveterate pacifist. Now, it is true that there is no evidence that Jesus openly espoused violence like many of his fellow zealot revolutionaries. But his view of violence was far more complex than I think a lot of people understand. He was no fool. I mean, he understood that you do not overthrow the world's largest empire with a sit-in. This is the thing that always cracks me up, is people do this to me all the time because people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King were influenced by Jesus. People think that Jesus was like Gandhi and Martin Luther King. There's no such thing as nonviolent resistance in the first century. Okay, it's not like we're going to remove Rome from power by all linking arms and singing Kumbaya. Rome is pretty good at dealing with that kind of resistance. So I think that we just have to understand that the historical Jesus had, I think, a far more complex view of the notion of force than we give him credit for. But to a larger point that you made, that it's not really what you asked, but I do want to make a point because it reminded me of something about why people are upset about this Jesus. It's not, I don't think, just this part to it. It's not that, it kind of questions some basic, foundations of Christian orthodoxy. I think it's because a Jesus whose purpose was to overturn the social order, whose purpose was to replace the rich with the poor, this, foreign brown socialist who wanted health care for everyone.
Right.
Is a Jesus that doesn't fit the political narrative. There are, as was said earlier, gatekeepers today to Jesus, gatekeepers of salvation, people who claim to speak for Jesus. There are entire political parties who claim to speak for Jesus. But if you listen to them, it seems like all Jesus ever talked about was gays and guns. By the way, the two things that Jesus never mentioned, gays and guns. When in reality, if you truly want to take Jesus' teaching seriously, it overturns almost everything that the politics of Jesus is based upon in this country. And I think that's where the problem comes. That's where the suspicion about this Jesus comes. This is a Jesus that is deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people who claim to be following him.